The scream that tore through the Montana night in 1878 belonged to a woman who had already learned that mercy was a luxury the West did not afford. And when Sarah Mitchell stumbled into the dusty town of Redemption with nothing but the clothes on her back and a brand burned into her shoulder blade, she carried a secret that would either destroy her or set her free. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dirt road leading into town, and Sarah pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the heat. Every step sent jolts of pain through her bare feet, but she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the iron pressed against her skin while Silas Blackwood held her down and laughed. The brand was his mark of ownership, his way of ensuring that even if she escaped his ranch, she would always belong to him. The letter B was seared into her flesh just below her left shoulder blade, hidden beneath layers of fabric that she clutched like armor. Redemption was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business before breakfast. Sarah had chosen it precisely because it was far enough from Blackwood's territory that she might have a chance, yet close enough to civilization that she could find work. She had 23 years of life behind her, and most of those years had been spent in servitude. Her parents had died when she was 12, leaving her with debts that Blackwood had been all too willing to assume in exchange for her labor. What had started as an arrangement to work off those debts had become something far darker when she turned 18, and Blackwood decided that her obligations extended beyond the kitchen and the laundry. The general store stood at the edge of town, its wooden sign creaking in the hot wind. Sarah pushed through the door, grateful for the shade. An older woman behind the counter looked up from her ledger, her eyes taking in Sarah's disheveled appearance with a mixture of concern and suspicion. "Can I help you, miss?" the woman asked, her voice cautious. "I am looking for work," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Any kind of work. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend animals, whatever you might need." The woman studied her for a long moment. "Where are you coming from?" "East of here," Sarah said, which was true enough. "I need a fresh start." Before the woman could respond, the door opened again, and Sarah turned to see a man entering the store. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty shirt and dark hair that fell just past his collar. His eyes were a striking blue, the color of the sky just before twilight, and when they landed on Sarah, she felt something shift in her chest. He could not have been much older than she was, perhaps 25 or 26, with the weathered look of someone who spent his days under the sun. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, nodding to the woman behind the counter. "I need to pick up that order of supplies." "Of course, Cole," Mrs. Henderson said, her demeanor warming considerably. "Give me just a moment. I was speaking with this young lady. She is looking for work." Cole's gaze returned to Sarah, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Not pity exactly, but understanding, as if he recognized something in her that spoke to his own experiences. "What kind of work are you looking for?" he asked directly. Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. "Anything honest." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I might have something. My ranch could use help with cooking and general housekeeping. My sister used to handle those duties, but she got married last month and moved to her husband's place. It has been just me and my ranch hands, and none of us are particularly skilled in the kitchen." "I can cook," Sarah said quickly, "and I work hard." "I do not doubt it," Cole said. His voice was gentle, but there was strength underneath it. "The pay is fair, and you would have your own room in the main house. Meals included, of course. The work is not easy, but I treat my people right." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "When can I start?" "Today, if you are ready," Cole said. "I have a wagon outside. I can take you out to the ranch once I have loaded the supplies." Mrs. Henderson looked between them with obvious curiosity, but she said nothing as she disappeared into the back room to gather Cole's order. Sarah stood awkwardly by the door, acutely aware of how she must look after days on the road. Cole did not seem bothered by her appearance. Instead, he moved to the counter and began examining a display of canned goods with casual interest. "I am Cole Garrett," he said without looking at her. "I run the Double G Ranch about 5 miles west of town. It is not the biggest spread in Montana, but it is mine, and I am proud of it." "Sarah Mitchell," she replied. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Garrett. Cole is fine," he said, glancing at her with another one of those small smiles. "We are not formal folk at the Double G." Mrs. Henderson returned with several boxes, and Cole loaded them into his arms with practiced ease. Sarah moved to hold the door open for him, and he thanked her as he carried the supplies out to the wagon waiting in the street. It took 3 trips to load everything, and Sarah helped with the lighter boxes despite Cole's protests that she did not need to. "You are already working, and I have not even gotten you to the ranch yet," he said with a laugh as they secured the last of the supplies. The wagon ride out to the Double G was quiet at first. Sarah sat on the bench beside Cole, watching the landscape roll past. The Montana Territory was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dotted with snow despite the summer heat. The grasslands stretched out in every direction, broken only by the occasional stand of trees or rocky outcrop. "You running from something?" Cole asked suddenly, his voice low and non-judgmental. Sarah's hands tightened in her lap. "Yes." "Do I need to worry about trouble following you to my ranch?" She considered lying, but something about Cole's straightforward manner made her want to be honest. "I hope not, but I cannot promise it will not." Cole was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." "Everyone deserves a second chance, Sarah. Whatever happened before, it stays in the past as far as I am concerned. But if trouble does come, I would appreciate knowing about it so I can be prepared." "The man I worked for," Sarah said slowly, "he believed he owned me. When I left, I did not ask his permission. Did you owe him money? My parents did before they died. He took me in to work off their debt, but the debt was paid years ago. He just never let me leave." Cole's jaw tightened. "What is this man's name?" "Silas Blackwood. He has a ranch about 2 days' ride east of here." "I know of him," Cole said, and his voice was hard. "His reputation is not good. He treats his workers like slaves and his animals worse. If he comes looking for you, he will not find a warm welcome at my ranch." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of fear that had been there so long she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. "Thank you." The Double G Ranch appeared on the horizon like a promise. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built from local timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. A barn stood nearby, freshly painted and well-maintained. Sarah could see several other outbuildings, including what looked like a bunkhouse for the ranch hands and a chicken coop. Everything spoke of care and attention, of a man who took pride in what he had built. 3 men emerged from the barn as the wagon rolled up, and Cole raised a hand in greeting. "Boys, this is Sarah Mitchell. She is going to be handling the cooking and housekeeping from now on, so I expect you to treat her with respect." The men nodded, their curiosity evident but tempered by politeness. The oldest of them, a grizzled man with gray in his beard, stepped forward. "Name is Tom Baker, ma'am. This here is young Danny Wilson, and that is Miguel Ortega. We are pleased to have you. Cole's cooking has been threatening to kill us for weeks now." Cole laughed and shook his head. "Tom exaggerates. I have only burned dinner twice. This week," Danny added with a grin. He could not have been more than 19, with freckles across his nose and an easy smile. Sarah found herself smiling back. "I promise to do my best not to poison anyone." "That is all we ask," Miguel said. His accent spoke of years spent in both Mexico and America, his English fluid but flavored with Spanish inflections. Cole helped Sarah down from the wagon, his hand warm and steady on her elbow. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she quickly stepped away, flustered. If Cole noticed her reaction, he did not show it. Instead, he led her up the porch steps and into the main house. The interior was clean but sparse, with furniture that was functional rather than decorative. A large fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and Sarah could see a kitchen through an open doorway. A staircase led to the second floor. "Your room is upstairs," Cole said. "Second door on the right. It is small, but it has a good window and a decent bed. The washroom is at the end of the hall. We have running water, which is a luxury out here. I had a pump system installed last year." Sarah followed him up the stairs, her legs aching from the long walk into town and the wagon ride. The room he showed her was indeed small, but it was clean and bright, with white curtains at the window and a colorful quilt on the bed. After months of sleeping on a thin mattress in a dark corner of Blackwood's bunkhouse, it looked like paradise. "It is perfect," she said softly. Cole smiled. "I am glad you think so. Take some time to rest and settle in. Dinner is not until 6, so you have a few hours. Tomorrow will be soon enough to start your duties." He left her alone, closing the door gently behind him. Sarah stood in the center of the room for a long moment, almost afraid to believe that this was real. Then, slowly, she sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress was soft, the quilt warm beneath her hands. She wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. Instead, she lay back and stared at the ceiling, feeling the tension drain from her body for the first time in months. She must have fallen asleep, because when she opened her eyes again, the light outside had changed to the golden glow of late afternoon. Sarah sat up quickly, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The ranch, Cole Garrett, safety. She stood and went to the window, looking out over the ranch yard. She could see the men working near the barn, moving with the easy efficiency of people who knew their jobs well. Cole was among them, his shirt sleeves rolled up as he helped lift what looked like a new section of fence. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the play of muscles in his arms, the confident way he moved. She turned away from the window, her face heating. She had no business thinking about Cole Garrett that way. He was her employer, nothing more. He had given her a job and a safe place to stay, and she would not repay his kindness by developing inappropriate feelings. But as she washed her face in the basin on the dresser and tried to tidy her appearance, Sarah could not quite shake the memory of his blue eyes or the gentleness in his voice when he had asked about her past. Dinner that evening was an awkward affair. Cole had insisted that Sarah join him at the table rather than eating separately, which felt strange after so many years of being treated as something less than a guest. The ranch hands ate in the bunkhouse, which Cole explained was their preference. They valued their privacy and their poker games, and he saw no reason to force them to observe dinner table manners after a long day of work. Sarah picked at the simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold meat that Cole had laid out. Her appetite was still uncertain, her stomach unused to regular food after weeks of near starvation during her escape from Blackwood's ranch. "You do not have to tell me everything," Cole said, breaking the silence, "but I would like to understand what happened. Not because I am nosy, but because I want to help if I can." Sarah set down her fork and met his eyes. There was genuine concern there and something else. Anger, perhaps, but not directed at her, directed at whoever had hurt her. "Silas Blackwood was a friend of my father's," she began. "When my parents died in a fever outbreak, he came to me and told me that my father had owed him a substantial debt. I was 12 years old and terrified. He said I could work off the debt at his ranch and that once it was paid, I would be free to go." "But that is not what happened," Cole said. Sarah shook her head. "For the first few years it was bearable. I worked in the house, cooking and cleaning for him and his men. It was hard labor, but I was fed and clothed. But when I turned 18, things changed. Blackwood started looking at me differently. He started making comments, touching me in ways that made my skin crawl. I tried to avoid him, but there was nowhere to go." Cole's hands clenched into fists on the table. "Did he hurt you?" "Yes," Sarah said simply. "In many ways, but the worst was when I tried to leave. I had saved a little money, hidden it away. I waited until he was away on business and I took one of the horses and rode for the nearest town. I thought if I could just get far enough away, I could start over." "He came after you," Cole said. Sarah nodded. "He caught me before I even made it halfway. He dragged me back to the ranch and called all his men together. He said I needed to learn a lesson about who I belonged to, and then he heated up a branding iron. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken horror. Cole's face had gone pale, his blue eyes dark with fury. "Where?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah reached up and touched her left shoulder blade. "Here." He branded me like I was one of his cattle, a letter B, so that everyone would know I was his property. Cole stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He turned away from her, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "That is not right. That is not even close to right. You are not property. You are a human being, and what he did is evil." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "That is why I ran again. I waited until he thought I was broken, until he stopped watching me so closely, and then one night I just walked away. I left everything behind except the clothes on my back. I walked for 3 days before I reached redemption." Cole turned back to face her, and Sarah was startled by the intensity in his expression. "I promise you, Sarah Mitchell, that man will never touch you again. If he comes here, he will have to go through me." "I do not want to bring trouble to your door," Sarah said. "You are not bringing trouble." "He is, and I do not take kindly to men who hurt women." Cole sat back down, visibly trying to calm himself. "I am sorry, I did not mean to get so angry. It is just that what he did to you is beyond the pale. No one deserves that." "Thank you," Sarah said, "for understanding, for believing me." "Why would I not believe you? Blackwood has money and influence. I am nobody." "You are not nobody," Cole said firmly. "Not to me." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, and she quickly looked down at her plate. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah rose early each morning to prepare breakfast for Cole and the ranch hands. She discovered that she enjoyed the work, the simple satisfaction of creating something good with her own hands. The men were appreciative of her cooking, often complimenting her on meals that Sarah thought were nothing special. But after weeks of Cole's attempts at cuisine, she supposed anything would taste good. Cole was a good employer, fair and kind without being overbearing. He worked alongside his men from dawn until dusk, mending fences, tending to the horses and cattle, and managing the 100 other tasks that came with running a ranch. But he always made time to check on Sarah, to ask if she needed anything or if there were repairs to be made in the house. Sarah found herself looking forward to those moments when Cole would come in from the fields, dusty and tired, and sit at the kitchen table while she prepared dinner. They would talk about simple things: the weather, the work on the ranch, the latest gossip from town. But sometimes their conversations would drift to deeper topics, to dreams and fears and the kind of life they hoped to build. It was during one of those conversations, about 2 weeks after Sarah's arrival, that Cole asked about the brand again. "Does it still hurt?" he asked gently. Sarah was kneading bread dough, her hands working automatically while she considered the question. "Not physically. It healed months ago, but sometimes I can feel it like a weight on my back, a reminder of what I escaped." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Would you let me see it?" Sarah froze, her hands stilling in the dough. The request was bold, almost inappropriate, but there was no lechery in Cole's voice, only a kind of quiet rage on her behalf. "Why?" she asked. Cole stood and walked to where she stood by the counter. He stopped a respectful distance away, not crowding her. "Because I want to see what that monster did to you. I want to see it so that I never forget why men like Silas Blackwood need to be held accountable for their actions." Sarah turned to face him, searching his eyes for any hint of ulterior motive. But all she saw was sincerity and a deep, abiding anger at the injustice she had suffered. "All right," she said softly. She washed her hands and dried them on her apron, then slowly reached up to the buttons at the back of her dress. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfastened the top few buttons and then slipped the fabric off her left shoulder, exposing the branded skin beneath. She heard Cole's sharp intake of breath, felt the heat of his presence as he stepped closer. Then, gently, almost reverently, she felt his fingers trace the raised scar tissue that formed the letter B. "My God," he whispered. "Sarah, I am so sorry this happened to you." The touch was gentle, but it sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Not the fearful shivers she associated with Blackwood's rough handling, but something else entirely. Something warm and electric that made her breath catch. "It is not your fault," she said, her voice unsteady. "I know," Cole said. "But I am sorry anyway. Sorry that the world has men like Blackwood in it. Sorry that you had to suffer at his hands." His fingers continued to trace the scar, and when he spoke again, his voice was low and fierce. "I promise you, Sarah, I will make this right. Somehow I will make him pay for what he did to you." "You do not have to do that," Sarah said, even as hope flared in her chest. "Yes, I do," Cole said, "because it is the right thing to do, because you deserve justice, and because I care about you." Sarah turned to face him, pulling her dress back up over her shoulder. They stood close together in the small kitchen, and she could see the intensity in his blue eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." Cole reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, tender, and Sarah felt her heart begin to race. "I do not know," he admitted. "Maybe it is because I see strength in you that most people would not have. Maybe it is because you have been through hell and you are still standing. Or maybe it is because from the moment I saw you in Mrs. Henderson's store, something in me recognized something in you." "Cole," Sarah whispered, not sure what she wanted to say. "I am not asking for anything from you," Cole said quickly. "I know you have been through too much to think about romance or anything like that, but I want you to know that you are safe here, and that I will protect you with everything I have." Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks, and Cole gently wiped them away with his thumb. "Thank you," she managed to say. They stood like that for a long moment, close but not touching beyond that gentle contact. Then Cole stepped back, giving her space, and the spell was broken. But something had changed between them. Sarah felt it in the way Cole's eyes followed her as she moved around the kitchen. She felt it in the way her heart lifted whenever she heard his boots on the porch. And she felt it in the quiet moments before sleep, when she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to be loved by a man like Cole Garrett. 3 weeks after Sarah's arrival at the Double G, trouble came. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Sarah was in the garden behind the house, tending to the vegetables that she had been coaxing back to life. Cole was in town with Tom, picking up supplies and checking on a shipment of lumber he had ordered. Danny and Miguel were out checking the fence lines on the northern pasture. Sarah did not hear the riders approach until they were already in the yard. She looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, her heart immediately beginning to race. 5 men sat on horseback, and at their head was a figure she recognized with visceral dread. Silas Blackwood had not changed much in the weeks since she had escaped. He was a big man, running to fat but still dangerous, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. He sat his horse like a king surveying his domain, and when his gaze landed on Sarah, he smiled. "There you are, girl," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "I have been looking for you." Sarah stood frozen, the trowel falling from her numb fingers. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The men had already fanned out, cutting off her escape routes. "You have caused me a lot of trouble," Blackwood continued, dismounting with a grunt. "Running off like that, making me come all this way to fetch you back." "I am disappointed, Sarah. I thought you had learned your lesson." "I am not going back," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I paid off my debt. You have no claim on me." Blackwood laughed, a harsh sound that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Now, that is where you are wrong. You see, the law is pretty clear on this. You were bound to me by contract. Running away makes you a thief since you took my property." "I am not property," Sarah said, lifting her chin. "The brand on your back says different," Blackwood said, his voice hardening. "Now, are you going to come peacefully, or do I need to have my boys drag you?" "She is not going anywhere with you." The voice came from the porch, and Sarah turned to see Danny standing there with a rifle in his hands. The young cowboy's face was pale but determined, and the rifle was pointed directly at Blackwood. "This is not your concern, boy," Blackwood said. "It became my concern when you rode onto Double G land and threatened our cook," Danny said. "Now I suggest you and your men turn around and ride out of here before my boss gets back." "Your boss does not scare me," Blackwood said, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Maybe not," Danny said, "but he should. Cole Garrett is a fair man, but he does not take kindly to bullies, and he especially does not like men who hurt women." "The girl is mine," Blackwood insisted. "I have papers that say so." "Then you can take it up with the sheriff," Danny said, "but you are not taking Sarah anywhere today." The standoff might have continued, but at that moment, the sound of an approaching wagon cut through the tension. Cole and Tom appeared around the bend, and Sarah saw Cole take in the scene in an instant. He pulled the wagon to a halt and jumped down, his face darkening as he recognized Blackwood. "What is going on here?" Cole asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Blackwood turned to face him. "I am here to collect my property. This girl ran away from my ranch, and I am within my rights to take her back." Cole walked slowly across the yard until he stood between Sarah and Blackwood. "Her name is Sarah Mitchell, and she is not your property. She is a free woman working on my ranch. She is bound to me by contract," Blackwood said. "Her father's debts became hers when he died." "Show me this contract," Cole said. Blackwood hesitated. "I do not carry it with me." "How convenient," Cole said. "Because I would be very interested to see a contract that allowed you to brand a human being like cattle." Blackwood's face flushed an ugly red. "That was discipline. She ran away, and I had to make sure she understood the consequences." "You tortured her," Cole said, and now there was no mistaking the fury in his voice. "You held her down and burned your mark into her skin. That is not discipline. That is cruelty, plain and simple." "You do not know what you are talking about," Blackwood said. "Show me your back, Blackwood," Cole said suddenly. "What? Show me your back. Take off your shirt. If branding is just discipline, then surely you would not mind having it done to you." Blackwood took a step back. "That is ridiculous." "No, what is ridiculous is that you think you can ride onto my land and take a woman against her will," Cole said. "Sarah stays here. If you want to press charges or take her to court, then you do that through proper channels. But you are not dragging her off like a runaway dog." "You are interfering with my property," Blackwood snarled. "I am protecting a woman from a man who has abused her," Cole countered. "And if you try to take her, I will put you down like the rabid animal you are." The threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Sarah saw Blackwood's hand move toward the gun at his hip, and everything seemed to slow down. Then Tom was there, his own rifle raised, and Miguel appeared from around the barn, also armed. "You are outnumbered, Blackwood," Cole said quietly. "And everyone here will testify that you came onto my land making threats. So you have two choices. You can ride out of here now and take this up with the law, or you can draw that gun and see what happens." For a long, tense moment, Sarah thought Blackwood would do something stupid. She could see the rage in his eyes, the desperate need to assert his control. But then one of his men leaned over and said something in a low voice, and Blackwood's hand moved away from his gun. "This is not over," Blackwood said, pointing a thick finger at Cole. "I will have her back one way or another. If you come near her again, it will be the last thing you do," Cole said. "Now get off my land." Blackwood remounted his horse, jerking brutally at the reins. His men followed suit, and within moments they were riding away in a cloud of dust. Sarah watched them go, her whole body shaking with reaction. As soon as they were out of sight, her legs gave out. Cole caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her. "I have you," he murmured. "You are safe, I have you." Sarah clung to him, unable to stop the sobs that tore from her throat. All the fear and tension of the past weeks came pouring out, and Cole held her through it all, one hand stroking her hair while he murmured soothing words. When the storm of emotion finally passed, Sarah pulled back, embarrassed by her display. "I am sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes. Do not apologize, Cole said firmly. You have nothing to be sorry for. That man is a monster and you have every right to be upset. He will come back, Sarah said. He will not give up. Then we will deal with it, Cole said. But he will not take you, I promise you that. Tom approached, his weathered face concerned. Boss, we should probably report this to the sheriff. Get it on record that Blackwood made threats. Good idea, Cole said. Sarah, would you be willing to make a statement about what Blackwood did to you, about the brand and everything else? Sarah hesitated. The thought of telling strangers about her shame was almost unbearable. But she looked into Cole's eyes and saw such faith in her, such certainty that she deserved justice, that she found herself nodding. Yes, she said, I will tell them everything. The trip to town the next day was one of the hardest things Sarah had ever done. Sheriff Jim Crawford was a gruff man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He listened carefully as Sarah recounted her story, making notes in a worn leather journal. When she described the branding, his face went hard. That is assault, plain and simple, he said. I do not care what kind of contract he claims to have. You cannot brand a person. Can you arrest him? Cole asked. Crawford sighed. It is complicated. Blackwood has money and friends in high places. But I can certainly pay him a visit and make it clear that he is not to come near Miss Mitchell again, and if he tries anything else, I will have grounds to bring charges. That is not enough, Cole said, frustration clear in his voice. It is what I can do legally, Crawford said. But between you and me, Cole, if Blackwood does anything stupid, I will look the other way while you defend your property and your people. It was not the justice Sarah had hoped for, but it was something. As they left the sheriff's office, Cole took her hand and squeezed it gently. We will figure this out, he said. I promise. The weeks that followed were tense. Sarah jumped at every sound, certain that Blackwood would return, but the days passed without incident and slowly she began to relax again. The work on the ranch continued, and Sarah threw herself into it with renewed determination. If Blackwood wanted to paint her as a runaway and a thief, then she would prove him wrong by being the best employee Cole had ever had. The ranch hands appreciated her efforts. Tom taught her how to preserve vegetables for the winter. Danny showed her where the wild berries grew on the edge of the property. Miguel shared his mother's recipes, and Sarah learned to make tortillas and spicy stews that had the men asking for seconds. But it was Cole who occupied most of her thoughts. The attraction she felt for him had grown steadily, fed by small moments of kindness and connection. The way he always made sure she had enough firewood for the stove. The time he noticed she was limping and insisted on examining her foot, finding a small cut that he cleaned and bandaged with gentle care. The evening he found her crying on the porch and sat with her in silence until she was ready to talk. Sarah tried to convince herself that what she felt was simply gratitude. Cole had saved her, given her a home and protection. Of course she would feel warmly toward him, but gratitude did not explain the way her heart raced when he smiled at her. It did not explain the dreams she had, vivid and intimate, that left her flushed and confused when she woke. She was falling in love with Cole Garrett, and that terrified her almost as much as Silas Blackwood did. It was a cool evening in early October when things between them finally came to a head. Sarah had finished cleaning up after dinner and was sitting on the porch, enjoying the last of the day's light. Cole came out and sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Pretty sunset, he said. Beautiful, Sarah agreed, though she was more aware of Cole than the sky. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the light faded and the first stars appeared. Then Cole spoke, his voice low and serious. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Sarah's stomach tightened with anxiety. What is it? I have been trying to fight this, Cole said. Trying to convince myself that it is not appropriate, that you have been through too much and need time, but I cannot lie to myself anymore. Cole, Sarah began, but he held up a hand. Please, let me finish. I am falling in love with you, Sarah. Maybe I have been since that first day in the general store. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, and I think about you constantly. I dream about you. And I know I should probably keep all of this to myself, but I cannot. I have to tell you how I feel, even if you do not feel the same way." Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I do feel the same way," she whispered. Cole turned to look at her, hope and wonder in his eyes. "You do?" "Yes," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. After everything with Blackwood, I thought I would never trust a man again. But you are different, Cole. You are kind and good, and you make me feel safe. You make me feel like I could have a future, a real life." Cole reached out and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You can have that life, Sarah, here with me if you want it." "What if Blackwood comes back?" Sarah asked. "What if he ruins everything?" "Then we will face it together," Cole said. "I am not afraid of Silas Blackwood, and I am not going to let him steal any more of your life." Sarah looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Cole's face. In the fading light, his eyes were dark and earnest, and she saw in them everything she had been afraid to hope for. "Love, partnership, a future. Kiss me," she said softly. Cole leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Sarah did not pull away. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a promise rather than a demand. Sarah felt warmth spread through her entire body, chasing away the last of the cold fear that had lived in her heart for so long. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Cole rested his forehead against hers, and Sarah closed her eyes, savoring the moment. "I love you," Cole said again, "and I swear to you I will make things right. Blackwood will answer for what he did to you." "I believe you," Sarah said, and for the first time in a long time she did. The opportunity for justice came sooner than expected. A week after Cole's confession, Tom came riding in from town with news that had the entire ranch buzzing. "Blackwood has been arrested," Tom announced as he dismounted. "Sheriff Crawford got a tip from one of Blackwood's former ranch hands. Turns out Blackwood has been rustling cattle from his neighbors for years, rebranding them and selling them as his own." Cole looked up from the fence he was mending, his eyes sharp. "Is the charge going to stick?" "Crawford seems to think so," Tom said. "The evidence is pretty solid." And once word got out about the arrest, more people started coming forward. "Seems Blackwood has made a lot of enemies over the years." Sarah emerged from the house, having heard the commotion. "What does this mean?" she asked. "It means Blackwood is going to prison," Cole said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "And it means you are free, Sarah, truly free." Sarah felt dizzy with relief. "Are you certain?" "As certain as we can be," Tom said. "The trial is set for next month, but Crawford says it is open and shut." Blackwood is done. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Sarah testified at Blackwood's trial, standing before the judge and jury and telling them exactly what he had done to her. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, bearing her scars and her shame to a room full of strangers. But Cole was there, sitting in the front row, and every time she faltered, she looked at him and found the strength to continue. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Silas Blackwood was found guilty on multiple counts of cattle rustling, fraud, and assault. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And as the verdict was read, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had carried for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. After the trial, Cole took her to a small restaurant in town, and they celebrated with a proper meal and glasses of wine. Sarah could not stop smiling, and every time she looked at Cole, she saw her own joy reflected back at her. "What happens now?" she asked as they walked back to the wagon in the twilight. "Now," Cole said, pulling her close, "we live our lives, we build something good together, and we do not let the past define us anymore." "I like the sound of that," Sarah said. Cole stopped walking and turned to face her. In the fading light, he looked serious and nervous, and Sarah's heart began to race. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, taking both of her hands in his. "I know we have not been together long. I know there is still a lot we do not know about each other. But I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You make me want to be better, to build something that will last. So I am asking you, right here and now, will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy this time. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Cole, I will marry you." Cole let out a whoop of joy and swept her up into his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that took her breath away, and Sarah kissed him back with everything she had. They were married a month later in a small ceremony at the church in Redemption. Sarah wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, and Cole wore his best suit with a flower in his lapel that Danny had picked from the meadow. Tom stood as Cole's best man, and Mrs. Henderson acted as Sarah's matron of honor. It was a small gathering, but it was filled with love. The ranch hands were there, along with a handful of townspeople who had come to know and respect Sarah in the months since her arrival. Sheriff Crawford attended, tipping his hat to the bride and groom with a warm smile. As Sarah walked down the aisle on Tom's arm, she looked at Cole waiting for her at the altar, and she marveled at how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a prisoner, marked and broken. Now she was about to become the wife of a good man, about to start a life built on love and respect rather than fear and control. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her with such tenderness that Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. They were happy tears, the kind she had never expected to cry. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung from the trees. There was music and dancing and more food than Sarah had seen in years. She danced with Cole under the stars, his arms around her waist, and felt truly, completely happy. Later that night, when the guests had gone home and the ranch was quiet, Cole carried Sarah over the threshold of their room. He set her down gently, his hands framing her face as he looked into her eyes. "Are you certain about this?" he asked softly. "If you need more time, I understand." Sarah shook her head. "I have never been more certain of anything. I love you, Cole. I want this. I want you." What followed was tender and sweet, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Cole was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs and her pleasure. He traced the scar on her shoulder blade with his lips, turning the mark of her shame into something beautiful, a testament to her strength and survival. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Sarah's head resting on Cole's chest as he ran his fingers through her hair. "I was thinking," Cole said, his voice drowsy with contentment, "maybe we should take a trip, go somewhere you have always wanted to see." Sarah smiled. "I have never been anywhere. This ranch is the most beautiful place I have ever known." "Then we will stay right here," Cole said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, "and we will make it even more beautiful together." The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and quiet joy. Sarah continued to manage the household, but now she also helped Cole with the business side of the ranch. She had a head for numbers and quickly proved herself invaluable in tracking expenses and profits. Together, they made decisions about which stock to buy, which land to expand into, and how to weather the inevitable challenges that came with ranching. The ranch prospered under their partnership. Cole hired 2 more hands, young men eager to learn the trade. Sarah planted a larger garden and started selling her preserves in town, bringing in extra income that they saved for the future. They talked about children, about building a legacy that would outlast them both. In the spring of their 2nd year together, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole over breakfast, watching as comprehension dawned on his face and then transformed into pure joy. He jumped up from the table and pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to be parents," he said in wonder. "We are," Sarah confirmed, her own eyes wet with happy tears. The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and by her 7th month she was so large and uncomfortable that even walking across the room was a challenge. But Cole was attentive and caring, bringing her cool cloths when she was overheated and rubbing her swollen feet at the end of each day. Their son was born on a cold November morning in 1880, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect. Cole held him with such reverence that Sarah fell in love with her husband all over again. They named him Samuel, after Cole's father, and from the moment he entered the world, he became the center of their universe. Watching Cole with their son, Sarah finally understood what love was supposed to look like. It was in the gentle way he cradled Samuel's tiny head. It was in the lullabies he sang in a slightly off-key voice. It was in the fierce protectiveness that blazed in his eyes whenever he looked at his family. Sarah's scar still ached sometimes, especially on cold mornings, but it no longer defined her. She was not Blackwood's victim anymore. She was Cole's wife, Samuel's mother, a partner in a thriving ranch, and a woman who had survived hell and come out stronger on the other side. 2 years after Samuel's birth, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination, and from the moment she could walk, she followed her big brother everywhere. The ranch rang with the sounds of children's laughter, a sound that Sarah had never thought she would hear in her own home. Life was not perfect. There were years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There were droughts and harsh winters and all the other challenges that came with life in the Montana Territory. But Sarah and Cole faced everything together, their love growing deeper with each passing year. On their 10th anniversary, Cole gave Sarah a gift that took her breath away. It was a small painting, commissioned from an artist in town, showing the ranch as it looked now. The house had been expanded with a second-story addition and a wraparound porch. The barn was freshly painted, and there were flowers blooming in the garden. In the foreground of the painting were 4 figures, Cole and Sarah, with Samuel and Rose between them. But what caught Sarah's attention was the detail on her painted figure. The artist had shown her from behind, and where the brand should have been, there was instead a beautiful cluster of wildflowers, covering the scar completely. "I thought you should see yourself the way I see you," Cole said softly. "Not as someone who was marked, but as someone who bloomed despite everything trying to keep you down." Sarah could not speak through her tears, so she simply pulled Cole into her arms and held him tight. They grew old together on that ranch, their love a constant through the changing seasons. Samuel grew into a fine young man who took over more and more of the ranch operations, as Cole's joints began to ache with age. Rose married a schoolteacher from town and started her own family, though she visited often with her children in tow. Sarah never forgot the darkness of her past, but she no longer lived in its shadow. Instead, she chose to focus on the light that Cole had brought into her life. The love, the laughter, the sense of belonging that she had once thought was beyond her reach. On warm summer evenings, Sarah and Cole would sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Cole would take her hand, his thumb tracing idle patterns on her skin, and Sarah would lean her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked once. "The hard years, all the struggles?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally, "because those struggles led me to you, and I would walk through fire 1,000 times over if it meant ending up here in this moment with you by my side." Cole kissed her temple, his lips warm against her skin. "I love you, Sarah Garrett, and I love you," Sarah replied, "always and forever." The Montana sky stretched out above them, vast and full of stars, and Sarah thought about the young woman she had been, running for her life with nothing but hope and desperation to guide her. If she could go back and tell that woman what awaited her, would she believe it? Would she believe that love could heal the deepest wounds, that scars could become stories of survival rather than shame? Sarah did not know. But as she sat there with Cole's hand in hers and the sounds of her grandchildren playing in the yard, she knew that every step of her journey had been worth it. The pain, the fear, the long road to this moment of peace, she was free. She was loved. She was home. And that, Sarah thought, was the greatest victory of all. Years continued to pass with the gentle rhythm of ranch life. Cole's hair turned silver at the temples, and Sarah's face gained the lines that came with a lifetime of smiling. Their children brought them grandchildren, and then those grandchildren brought great-grandchildren, until the Double G Ranch was filled with multiple generations of Garretts. Samuel took over the ranch completely when Cole's arthritis made it too difficult to ride for long hours. But Cole never truly retired, always finding small tasks to keep himself busy and offering advice when asked. Sarah continued to cook and garden, her preserves now famous throughout the county. Young wives would come to her for recipes and advice, and Sarah would share both generously, along with stories about the early days of the ranch. She never told those young women about Silas Blackwood or the brand that still marked her skin beneath her dress. That was a private pain, one she had shared only with Cole and, eventually, with her children when they were old enough to understand. She wanted them to know that survival was possible, that the worst moments of life did not have to define the rest of it. Blackwood died in prison in 1895, a broken man whose name had become synonymous with cruelty in the territory. Sarah felt nothing when she heard the news, not even satisfaction. He had already taken too much of her life. She would not give him her emotions as well. Instead, that evening she and Cole took a walk through the ranch, visiting all their favorite spots. The creek where they had caught their first fish together, the meadow where Rose had learned to ride, the old oak tree under which Samuel had proposed to his wife. "We built something good here," Cole said as they paused on a small rise that overlooked the ranch buildings. "We did," Sarah agreed, "better than I ever dreamed possible." Cole pulled her close, his arm around her waist. Despite his age, he was still strong, still the man who had promised to protect her all those years ago. "You remember that first day?" he asked. "When I saw you in Mrs. Henderson's store." "I remember," Sarah said. "You looked at me like I was a person, not just a nuisance or a problem to be solved. It was the first time in years that someone had seen me." "I saw you," Cole said softly, "and I knew my life was about to change." They stood there as the sun set, painting the world in shades of amber and rose. In the distance, Sarah could hear the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Cattle lowing, horses whinnying, the calls of her family as they finished their evening chores. This was her legacy, Sarah thought. Not the scar on her back or the years of suffering that had come before. But this ranch, this family, this love that had grown from the ashes of her old life. She had survived, and more than that, she had thrived. She had found a man who loved her not despite her scars, but because of the strength they represented. And together they had built something that would last long after they were gone. "Thank you," Sarah said suddenly. Cole looked down at her, puzzled. "For what?" "For seeing me," Sarah said. "For believing in me when I could not believe in myself. For giving me a home and a family and a life worth living." Cole's eyes grew bright with emotion. "Sarah, you gave me all of those things too. Before you came, this ranch was just a business. You turned it into a home. You made me understand what love really meant." They kissed then, a sweet and lingering kiss that spoke of decades of devotion. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Come on," Cole said, taking her hand. "Let us go home." And hand in hand, they walked back down the hill toward the lights of the ranch house, where their family waited. Where love had turned a place of fear into a sanctuary. Where a brand meant to mark ownership had become, instead, a symbol of survival and strength. Sarah lived to see her great-grandchildren grow, to watch as the Double G Ranch expanded and prospered under Samuel's capable management. She lived to see Montana become a state in 1889, to watch as the wild frontier of her youth transformed into something more civilized, though no less beautiful. And through it all, Cole was by her side. Her partner, her love, her home. When Sarah Garrett died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, with Cole holding her hand, the entire community mourned. The church in Redemption was packed for her funeral, filled with people whose lives she had touched. Ranch hands and neighbors, friends and family, all gathered to say goodbye to a woman who had faced unimaginable cruelty and responded with grace and strength. Cole spoke at the service, his voice steady despite his grief. He told them about the day he had first seen Sarah, about the immediate connection he had felt. He spoke about her courage, her kindness, her unwavering determination to build a better life not just for herself but for everyone around her. And then, with tears streaming down his weathered face, he told them about the scar. "Some of you may not know," he said, "that my Sarah bore a mark of cruelty on her body. She was branded by a man who believed he could own another human being. But that scar did not define her. Instead, it became a testament to her strength. She survived what would have broken most people, and she used that survival to create something beautiful." He paused, looking out at the gathered crowd. "Sarah taught me that love is not just about the good times. It is about standing beside someone through the darkness and helping them find their way back to the light. She taught me that justice matters, that standing up for what is right is worth any cost. And she taught me that the past does not have to dictate the future." Cole lived for 3 more years after Sarah's death, years that felt empty without her presence. But he filled those years with his children and grandchildren, passing on the lessons that Sarah had taught him. He told them stories about their grandmother, about her strength and her love, about the way she had transformed his life. When Cole Garrett died at the age of 81, he was buried beside Sarah on a hill overlooking the Double G Ranch. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that bore their names and dates and a shared inscription. Together they built a legacy of love. The Double G Ranch continued to thrive for generations, always remaining in the Garrett family. Samuel's children and grandchildren told the story of Cole and Sarah, of how a cowboy had fallen in love with a woman marked by cruelty and had promised her vengeance and justice. They told of how that promise had been kept, how love had conquered fear, and how from the ashes of pain and suffering, something beautiful had grown. And on warm summer evenings, when the Montana sky blazed with sunset colors, the Garrett descendants would sometimes walk up to that hill where Cole and Sarah rested. They would stand there, looking out over the ranch that love had built, and they would remember. They would remember that strength comes in many forms, that scars can become stories of survival, that justice, though sometimes delayed, is always worth fighting for, and that love, true love, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. The brand that Silas Blackwood had burned into Sarah's skin had been meant to mark her as property, to ensure that she could never escape his control. But instead, it had become a symbol of something far more powerful, a reminder that cruelty does not have the final word. That victims can become survivors and survivors can become victors. Sarah Mitchell Garrett had been branded like cattle by her former master. But a cowboy had traced that scar with gentle fingers and promised vengeance. And more than that, he had promised love. He had promised a future. He had promised that she would never be alone again, and he had kept every single one of those promises. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the darkness that had come before, but the light that followed. Not the cruelty of one evil man, but the kindness and devotion of one good one. Not the mark of ownership, but the choice to love freely and fully. The Double G Ranch stood as a testament to that truth, a place where generations of Garretts learned that love is the strongest force in the world, that it can overcome anything, heal any wound, bridge any divide. And somewhere, perhaps, the spirits of Cole and Sarah Garrett walked hand in hand through the meadows they had loved, watching over the family they had created and the legacy they had built. A legacy not of pain but of hope, not of cruelty but of compassion, not of ownership but of freedom. A legacy of love that would endure as long as the Montana sky stretched overhead and the grass grew green on the rolling plains. This was their story. A story of survival and justice, of courage and devotion, of a brand meant to enslave, and a love that set free. And it was a story that would never be forgotten. The Double G Ranch continued its operations well into the 20th century, adapting to changing times while holding fast to the values that Cole and Sarah had instilled. Electric lights replaced lanterns, trucks supplemented horses, but the core of what made the ranch special remained unchanged. It was a place built on love and respect, where every person was valued and every voice was heard. Sarah's great-great-granddaughter, named Sarah in her honor, found an old photograph one day while cleaning out the attic of the original ranch house. It showed a young couple standing on the porch, the woman wearing a simple dress and the man in a cowboy's hat. They were holding hands, and even in the faded sepia tones, the love between them was unmistakable. On the back of the photograph, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Cole and Sarah, 1878, the day we chose each other." Young Sarah held the photograph carefully, feeling a connection across the generations to the woman whose name she shared. She had heard the stories, of course, about the original Sarah's escape from slavery in all but name, about the brand she bore, about Cole's fierce protection and the love that had blossomed between them. But seeing their faces, seeing the joy and hope captured in that moment, made it real in a way that stories never quite could. They were happy, her grandfather said, coming up behind her. He was Samuel's grandson, a man in his 60s who still worked the ranch every day. Despite everything that came before, despite the challenges they faced, they were genuinely, deeply happy. How did they do it? Young Sarah asked. How did she move past something so terrible? Her grandfather smiled. She never forgot what happened to her. She carried those scars, physical and emotional, for the rest of her life. But she refused to let them be the end of her story. She chose to write a new ending with Cole by her side. That is what real strength looks like, Sarah. Not pretending the pain never happened, but refusing to let it have the final word. Young Sarah carefully placed the photograph in a frame and hung it in the ranch house's main room, where everyone who entered would see it, a reminder of where they came from. A testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. And as the years continued to pass, as new generations of Garretts were born and old ones passed on, that photograph remained. Cole and Sarah, forever young, forever in love, forever standing as proof that even the darkest night eventually gives way to dawn. Their story became more than just family history. It became a legend, told and retold, adapted and embellished, but never losing its essential truth. That love is stronger than hate, that justice is worth fighting for, and that every person deserves the chance to write their own story. The scar that Silas Blackwood had burned into Sarah's skin had long since turned to dust with her body. But the love she and Cole had built together lived on, growing stronger with each passing generation, branching out like a tree whose roots ran deep into the Montana soil. And that love, more than any brand or scar, was what truly marked the Garrett family. It was their inheritance, more valuable than land or cattle or money. It was the knowledge that they came from people who had faced the worst the world had to offer and had chosen, again and again, to respond with love. That was the legacy of Cole and Sarah Garrett. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a living example of what it means to overcome, to forgive without forgetting, to build something beautiful from the ruins of pain. And as long as the Double G Ranch stood, as long as the Garrett name endured, their story would continue to inspire. A reminder that no matter how dark the past, the future is always unwritten, that scars are not signs of weakness but badges of survival, that a cowboy's promise to trace a scar and seek vengeance could transform into something far more powerful, a lifetime of love, respect, and partnership. This was their gift to future generations. This was their triumph over cruelty and injustice. This was the true meaning of happily ever after, not a fairy tale ending where all problems disappear, but a real, hard-won happiness built on honesty, courage, and an unshakable commitment to each other. A happiness that acknowledged pain while refusing to be defined by it. A happiness that looked the worst of humanity in the face and said, "You do not get to win." And in the end, in the story of Cole and Sarah Garrett, love truly did win. It won in the moment Cole first saw Sarah and recognized her humanity. It won when he traced her scar and promised justice. It won in every day they spent building a life together, in every child they raised, in every sunset they watched from their porch. Love won because they chose it again and again over fear and anger and despair. They chose each other, chose hope, chose to believe that their story did not have to end in tragedy. And because of that choice, because of their courage and their devotion, generations of Garretts would grow up knowing that they came from strength. That they were the descendants of a woman who survived the unsurvivable and a man who stood beside her without question or hesitation. That was the power of their story. That was why it mattered, why it endured, why it would continue to be told as long as there were Garretts to tell it, because it was not just a story about the past. It was a promise about the future. A promise that love is always possible, always worth fighting for, always strong enough to overcome whatever obstacles stand in its way. Cole and Sarah Garrett had proved that. They had lived it, and their legacy would continue to prove it for generations to come. The Montana sun set over the Double G Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, just as it had on that long-ago evening when a young cowboy had held a scarred woman in his arms and promised her forever. The buildings had changed, the faces had changed, but the land remained solid and enduring, bearing witness to the love that had transformed it from a simple cattle ranch into something far more significant: a home, a sanctuary. A place where broken things could heal and new beginnings were always possible. And in the twilight, if you listened carefully, you might almost hear the echo of laughter, the murmur of voices promising forever, the sound of two hearts beating as one. Cole and Sarah Garrett were gone, but they were not forgotten. They lived on in every choice their descendants made to love boldly, to stand up for justice, to see the humanity in others even when the world tried to deny it. Theirs was a story of the Wild West, but it was also a timeless story. A story about what it means to be human, to suffer and survive, to love and be loved in return. And it was a story that would never truly end, because love, real love, never does. It just grows and changes and continues, an eternal flame passed from one generation to the next, lighting the way forward into an uncertain future. That was the final gift of Cole and Sarah Garrett. Not just a ranch or a family name, but the knowledge that love is the most powerful force in the universe. That it can heal any wound, overcome any obstacle, transform any tragedy into triumph. They had lived that truth. They had proved it. And their story would stand forever as a testament to the indomitable power of the human heart to love, to hope, and to believe in better days ahead. The brand that was meant to mark Sarah as property had instead become the starting point of a love story for the ages. A story of vengeance that transformed into devotion, of pain that blossomed into joy, of two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to walk together into the light. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the scar, but the love that covered it. Not the brand, but the choice to define themselves by their love rather than by the cruelty of others. Cole and Sarah Garrett had written their own ending, and it was beautiful. The Double G Ranch stood silent under the stars, a monument to love and resilience, and the story of the cowboy who traced a scar and promised vengeance, only to deliver something far greater: a lifetime of devotion, a legacy of love, and a future bright with hope. This was their story. This was their victory. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and deeply deserved, and it would echo through the generations, a reminder that no matter what marks we bear, we always have the power to choose our own endings, to choose love over hate, hope over despair, and light over darkness. That was the true legacy of Cole and Sarah Garrett, and it was a legacy that would never die.